If you sell on Etsy, one of the most important parts of your shop is the thumbnail of your listing. That is what people see in search. That is what convinces them to click and go through and view your product. Unfortunately, a lot of people make very common mistakes with these thumbnails. And today I'm going to share 5 of those mistakes with you and how you can fix them so that you don't get caught in the trap of making these errors and missing out on clicks and sales in your Etsy shop. Mistake number 1 is cutting off the product. I see this so often where people take their initial photo and it looks great, but then when it turns into a thumbnail on the front page of their store or in search, it cuts off part of their product, so you can't see the whole product in the thumbnail. Sometimes this is really bad, where it like cuts the product in half even. But even if you're cutting off corners and things like that, it just does not look great. You want to make sure your whole product is visible in the thumbnail, so it's not getting cut off. Now, occasionally there may be a circumstance where this is just impossible to fix, and if so, just do your best to fit as much of the product and the focal point. Make sure, that people can see the main part of the product. For example, if you're selling t-shirts with a slogan on them, you might just want to focus on the slogan in the thumbnail so that people can see that up close rather than showing the entire shirt if the slogan's too small to read or make out in the thumbnail, for example, because people aren't going to click on that because it's not going to be obvious what they're actually buying, as in what the slogan or the picture is. But general rule of thumb is you don't want to cut off your product on the edges of the thumbnail. Number 2 is the opposite problem, where people are way too zoomed out on their thumbnail and their product is really small in the thumbnail. That is also a really big problem because remember, most people are shopping on their phones and seeing a teeny tiny picture. You need to make sure that your product is as big in the frame as possible so that they can see what it is you're selling and that it's not too far back or too small in the frame. I see this a lot with my fellow jewelry sellers who have the products photographed from too far back in the thumbnail, and it's about finding that balance point between not cutting off the product, but also not having it so far back in the frame that it's hard to make out what the details are. The third mistake I see people make is having blurry or unclear thumbnails. Now, obviously this is a no-go for any photo in your shop. You do not want blurry, dirty, unclear photos. Look, if this is all kind of new to you and you're learning about product photography, I have a bunch of videos on this channel about it. And I also have a workshop in the Thriver Circle, my membership community for makers, which is all about an introduction to product photography, the equipment, things like lighting, all the basic details that you need to learn when it comes to starting your journey of product photography are in that workshop. So you can check that out by becoming a member over at thrivercircle.com. I'll leave a link below. So having blurry or unclear photos is bad on any photo in your shop, but it's particularly bad in your thumbnail photo. Remember, you are competing against a lot of other people who are doing a really good job of their product photos. Yours needs to not only be okay, but it needs to stand out. So don't waste your time using photos that are subpar. Okay, the fourth mistake I see a lot of people make is cluttering their photo. In other words, there's too much styling going on and not enough focus on the product itself. Remember, the rule of thumb is your product should be the star of the show. If I'm looking at your product photo, particularly your first photo, that thumbnail photo, it should not take me any effort to work out what the product is that you are selling. If there is too much styling going on, or there's too much of a cluttered background, too many different colors, shapes, textures, my eye is jumping all over the place. No, I want to be focused and drawn straight to your product. That should be the centerpiece. I find a lot of beginners overstyle their product photos. Now, there's nothing wrong with having some beautifully styled product photos, especially, lifestyle shots, stuff for your social media, etc. But that very first thumbnail really should be all about the product, and it should focus on the product to the exclusion of overstyling. So when in doubt, take styling elements away rather than adding more in, because the product needs to be front center and the star of the photograph. And the fifth mistake I see a lot of people make is honestly, their photos are just boring. There's no dynamism to the photo. There's no interest. It doesn't stand out. It doesn't pop. It doesn't make me want to click. It's a bit dull, it's a bit boring. So make sure you are not the boring photo, okay? And oftentimes this happens because the photo is not edited well. Again, I cover that in my workshop. I also have another workshop in the circle where I cover how to edit photos. You need to edit your product photos to make sure that they are beautifully balanced, their lighting, their colors. It needs to be true to life, but it also needs to be nice and bright and poppy. A lot of times when we take an initial photo, it's a little bit flat, and beginners often will just upload that photo to Etsy and it kind of fades into the background. You don't want to be the person doing that. You want to make sure your photo is not boring. Play around with angles, play around with backgrounds, play around with your editing so that you have a photo that stands out from the competition. So if you fix these 5 problems, you'll be well on the way to having a beautiful, clickable, and enticing thumbnail photo for your product in your Etsy shop. And as I said, I have lots of videos on my channel to help you with your product photography. So I will link to this one here if that's still something that you are working on. I hope you find that one useful. Thanks so much for watching this one. If you enjoyed it, please give me a thumbs up. Let me know what your biggest takeaway was in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss my future videos on how to have a thriving and profitable handmade business. Bye for now.